Werewolf Rising. This is one hell of a cheap movie, but if you're a werewolf fan, you may want to listen to this. So Werewolf Rising, a 2014 very low budget movie, and it's quite a simple plot and really focuses on a young woman as she is struggling with being an alcoholic, decides to kind of move to this sort of old country home where she sort of used to grow up, and it's pretty much hasn't been lived in for you know many years, and it's been looked after by a local neighbour called Wayne. Anyway, she moves up there to try and sort of get away from her troubled past, and it seems that this coincidentally there seems to be this kind of these prison break that's happened recently, and two convicts have escaped, and they are both kind of hanging around the property. One is kind of this dangerous rapist, and this other one is kind of this sort of drug dealer who is a little more on the friendly side. And there seems to be some kind of werewolf who has attacked this rapist at the beginning of the movie, and ultimately, obviously, he becomes a werewolf. And you know, so obviously things escalate, and people are attacked, and you know, essentially, actually, if you know how the werewolf curse is spread, then you know where it's going. So that's pretty much the movie that I'll say without spoiling too much in it. So what's the movie like? Well, like I said, this is a extremely low budget film, so don't be expecting anything sort of too flashy or high budget production values, things like that. But to be honest with you, this film is a little bit of a mess in a number of ways. The first thing I want to talk about here is the editing. It might be a funny thing to start off with, but it just seems a bit all over the place. It's quite a short film. It's only about 80 minutes, so it's not a long film. But it seems to me that there's been stuff that's edited out, which seems to be very sort of conspicuous by its absence, and things that don't quite make sense. And for example, there's the beginning of the movie, we see our kind of main character Emma. She's on the phone talking to someone. Who's she talking to? She's saying that she's buying them a cup of coffee or something, and that's how she's used to doing it. I thought it was some boyfriend or something, but there's no ever mention of it again, so I have no idea who she's meant to be talking to at that point. And there's a couple of other instances just where stuff sort of happens throughout the film, where you either come in at the end of a conversation, for example, where Wayne is telling Emma about this kind of this Johnny Lee, who's one of the convicts who happens to be his nephew. We sort of come in at the end of the conversation with that, which is kind of weird. And there's a scene when one of the werewolf attacks Emma, who's I guess the main sort of heroine, if you like, basically, you know, runs out of her house, goes into her truck, drives away, but then comes back to her house again. And just like, why would you? What's the point? Was there something else that was meant to happen sort of in between that time? So some weird editing. Also, the music here, I have to talk about the music briefly before I really get into the actual plot and stuff. The music is a little bit distracting. It's kind of basically piano type music throughout the kind of movie. They kind of use the same sort of 2 or 3 songs over and over again, and it's kind of a little bit distracting. So I had a bit of a problem with the kind of the score here. So the plot, now like I said, because of the way the film edited it seems a little bit disjointed, so it doesn't kind of always make sense, and there's just a few plot points as we sort of go on throughout the movie. I was thinking, I don't understand what's quite happening here. So there's obviously an original werewolf which attacks the convict at the beginning of the movie, the rapist guy. And what's happened to him? What's happened to that werewolf? And there's a scene towards the end of the film, was a minor spoiler, I suppose, where there's this female groupie of this serial killer who I thought was going to be the original werewolf, but it isn't. And she tells us basically that she's been writing to this guy, this convict, while he's been in prison, and he's kind of basically a groupie and wants to meet him. But she's not freaked out at all when he turns up as a werewolf. And I thought, he turned into a werewolf after he escaped prison, so why isn't she freaked out? So there's all these things that don't really make sense. I think there's a bit of a twist in regards to sort of family lineage at the end, which again is not really sort of explained, and it doesn't make sense, unfortunately. So I think the guy who directed it was also the writer, and I think he's had these ideas basically and trying to sort of articulate them, but just hasn't explained it very well to an audience member. I think maybe in his mind it kind of makes sense, but as an outsider watching this film, there's just certain things that just don't make sense to me, to be honest with you. Now you can just, I guess, watch it just for the werewolf attacks, but to be honest, there's quite a low body count in this film. Werewolf effects themselves, it's essentially just a man in a suit. And I don't think it's not terrible, but it is obviously on the sort of the cheaper side. The other kind of main thing I would say here is the acting. The acting, I guess, with the exception of Emma, who is the main sort of female lead, it's not too bad, but the rest of the cast don't seem to be particularly professional actors, really, and it comes across a little sort of stilted, and you know, just on the sort of not experienced in acting, basically. So unfortunately the acting isn't fantastic, generally speaking, throughout the movie. So unfortunately there's a fair amount issues I have with this movie. Unfortunately, it doesn't come across as a particularly professionally made movie. Like I said, it is low budget. Probably not expecting anything too fantastic at this. So I try to kind of judge them with a bit more of a a fairer outlook. But nonetheless, I have to say that this film was dogged with problems. I guess there's worse movies, but this is really not a lot I can kind of say, oh, this is a fantastic movie for this, for that and the other. There's just too many things on the kind of negative side. Don't have to give this movie a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.